This is Choose the Bear, where we dive deep into the power and joy of living a vibrant, independent life on your own terms. This podcast is your go-to source for smart, fun, and insightful conversations about what it means to embrace independence and live the life you choose. I'm Kat Calvin, and together we'll explore how this movement is challenging outdated stereotypes, redefining success, and empowering people to live their best independent lives. Our next guest caused a sensation when she wrote a viral article for the Huffington Post titled, "No, I don't want to have kids, and I'm tired of having to explain why not," a sentiment that I'm sure many of you can agree with. Her name is Kerry Graham, and she is a brilliant, fun, just lovely, wonderful person that I could have spoken to forever. And she's learned a lot about the article and herself and just sort of life as a child-free woman. And she's fantastic. I think we may have gone on a perhaps too long side tangent about books, although there's no such thing as a too long side tangent about books. But that's just she's just another just really fun, wonderful, single child-free woman out here living her best life. And it was so much fun to talk to her. And I hope you find this interview inspirational and lighthearted for the most part, and just sort of lovely. And I think you'll learn a lot too. So enjoy. Well, hello, everyone. I am so excited because we're here with someone who I'm going to guess you read her article that we're talking about many years ago. And when we start talking about it, you'll be like, oh my God, I remember that. I recently heard her speak. We were both speaking together on a Zoom call for the nascent Alliance of Child-Free Voters. And her story was really interesting and really personal. And I just thought that it would be a perfect addition to the podcast. So Kerry Graham, welcome.
Hi, thank you. I'm so happy.
I'm so happy to have you here. Before we dive in, just tell us, who are you? What do you do? What's your story?
Oh my goodness. I am someone who loves the written word. I've been thinking about this question, like, tell me about yourself. And I feel like it really, like, my whole life story comes down to me loving to read and write. So that's how I process the world. That's how I feel like myself. That's how I've made money. I was an English teacher for a long time. I'm a writer now. And yeah, that's just at the heart of who I am. So that's what I would say is what you have to know about me. Reader and writing.
That's amazing. I love that. As a child who gave herself glasses at 7 years old from reading too much, I understand completely. I actually just last night finished this book, James by Percival Everett. I don't know if you've read it.
Tell me about it.
It is amazing. It's on all of the lists, like the Booker finalists, Pulitzer finalists, all the
excellent.
He takes the Huckleberry Finn story of Huck and Jim running away, but he tells it from the perspective of Jim the slave.
Oh, that's so
important. It's fascinating, but you'll like, if you read the first chapter, there's this whole thing about language that runs through the whole book and really is sort of the theme of the book. And it's fascinating. As a person who loves language and words and like the deeper meaning behind them, you will love it.
Oh yeah, thank you for that. I'm always looking for, like, as if you can ever get through your to be read list, but I'm always adding. So thank you for giving me another one.
Well, so I mean, this is now a podcast about books, but Litzy is have you been on Litzy? Litzy is Instagram for books. It's amazing. It's a social media app, but it's only to share books.
Oh, so is it like the new Goodreads, like the less?
Well, it's kind of, yeah, because it's literally Instagram for books. So people just post pictures of their books and then just like do a quote or talk about it or review it or whatever. It's my favorite thing.
Oh, I need to like spend my time there.
Let's
Yeah.
see. I mean, it's dangerous because your TBR will be even longer than it ever is.
Right, right.
But you also get to brag when you finish your book.
Yeah,
Um,
love it.
yeah, well, readers, listeners, these will both be in the show notes. They have nothing to do with anything. They're really
Just
good.
so we love it.
Okay, but moving aside from our book corner, let's start with, so you wrote a viral Huffington Post article titled "No, I don't want to have kids, and I'm tired of having to explain why not." It's a great title. It says it all. But can you talk a little bit about what the article was about and why you wrote it?
So I actually had to reread it this morning because it's been some years, as we'll talk about. It's been 5, which is a lot. And I wrote it, well, let's see. It's about the fact that we should trust what women say they want and don't want. So, specifically in this essay, it was about when someone says they don't want kids, okay, you don't want kids. Like, it's not a thing to be interrogated, to be questioned. There's nothing to probe there. It's, oh, I don't want kids. Okay. And not having to get to the bottom of why someone doesn't want kids. And I wrote it because it took, I hear, I hear stories and I'm so jealous of child-free people who were like, oh, I always knew I wasn't going to have kids. Like, I always knew I wanted to be child-free because I sure didn't. Like, I really, and I think it's because I thought I wanted to have, I think it's because I thought I was supposed to have kids, right? And so it wasn't until I'm 40 now. It wasn't until like my early 30s where I really started thinking, oh, I don't actually want this for myself. And so I very slowly started to like divulge that, which was its whole process of like working through shame. And then to like go through all of that like emotional mental labor work for myself just to be met with, well, why? It's like, oh my God, what? Like, this isn't for you to ask me.
Right.
So yeah, so that's what the essay was for.
That's so fascinating. I was 7 when I decided not to have kids.
See,
And
so I'm jealous of you.
I
Congratulations.
was listening to, so we're exactly the same age. So you'll remember when we were kids and Whitney Houston, The Greatest Love of All, was playing every 5 seconds everywhere.
Yes.
So probably on the 10,000th listen at 7. And she said, the children are the future. And I was like, what about the women? And now look, I was raised by a woman who went to a women's college in the 70s. So like I had a very feminist upbringing anyways, but I was like, what about the women? And then I was decided I'm not getting married and having children. And I told my parents that's
Oh, that's amazing. How did
when I
that
was
go?
7. So they were like, fine, whatever. But
Right.
there's
We'll take this with
a
some
to me. I
grains.
was like, wait a second, there's something wrong with it. So what was the reaction that you got to the article?
Well, I'll tell you, it was the first time anything I'd written, because I've been getting published for like a handful of years at this point, but this was my first time on like a bigger national
Mhm.
outlet. And so when I got published by HuffPo again, I was expecting the exact same reaction, and no, it was not. Like this one was
Yeah.
insane. Like I was just walking down the street and I was getting follows and people messaging me on all the platforms that I was on. So a lot of positivity, a lot of people saying thank you, a lot of, and this was what was most heartening to me, a lot of women in their 50s, 60s, 70s saying, good for you. I didn't have kids. I have never regretted it.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that. And I was so thankful. And of course, definitely the trolls. I accidentally, like, and I had like trained myself, like, do not read the comments, do not read the comments. And there was like a time like I accidentally, I don't know, like I
Yeah.
clicked on a thing on Twitter and like wasn't, and Twitter wasn't what it was then, so I was just like, I didn't know I was going to see all the meanness and lots of meanness. And so my little brother, bless his heart, like he did go through, because I also wanted to know some of the nice things people were saying, because like I was getting messages that I was reading, but I wasn't reading the comments. So my
Yeah.
little brother did go through and
Oh, that's nice.
like like read them for me to like report back the good things, and
Oh,
was like furious on my behalf the
yeah.
not as good things that
Yeah.
were said.
That's smart. You need a buffer because the comments are a nightmare, but you do want the good stuff.
Right,
So it's
right.
good. It's good to have that in between person.
Yes, I appreciated that. Yeah.
So one of the things that I found interesting and why I really wanted to talk, besides just that you're great, is that your article it was a million years ago. It was pre-COVID. So
Million years, yes, yes.
pre-apocalypse. Um, but it was ahead of the 4B movement, right? And so I'm super interested in what your reaction was in seeing the birth of this international movement as a person who was kind of early onto having a really viral article about, being child free. And now we're seeing this movement all over the world. What was your reaction to that, or what is?
I've had a lot of emotions in response to it. One thing I will say is just when the actual essay came out, so back July of 2019, and some of the followers that I mentioned and everything, there like I didn't know until I had the essay published that there was a community of child-free people, like at all. I just remember thinking, oh, I'm someone who doesn't want to have kids, and now I'm going to write this essay. And of course there are other people out there, but like it didn't even cross my mind that there would be like intentional community and like solidarity and partnership around that decision and this life. And so that was just an immediate welcome surprise. Like I did not know that was a thing. So, and that was, like I said, back in 2019. And it has been, in some ways, yes, it's a lot more obvious and visible, and we're hearing more about it, and the conversations are becoming more mainstream. But like what really has changed? I mean, like, I don't know, I still feel very defensive sometimes about my decision because of reactions I have continued to get, and relationships in my own life that have changed because I not only am I someone who is child free, like now I'm speaking about it and talking about
Yeah.
it, and apparently that does make people uncomfortable, and I'm like experiencing some tension because of that. So yeah, like on the one hand, I'm loving seeing the centering of this kind of choice.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there's still so much more to go.
Yeah.
And I'm hopeful that the energy and momentum will continue.
Well, and I think that so you're starting to answer my next question, as I think there are a lot of people who say, who cares if you decide to be child free? Why do you even have to talk about it? Why do you need a community? Blah blah blah. But you're sort of starting to answer like that, and what you said before, the fact that like this actually is for a lot of people, and it feels weird because it shouldn't matter, but for so many people it's such a critical decision that really says everything about who you are as a
Mhm.
person, or morality, or whatever. And so I think that it's difficult for people who haven't made this decision or who don't live in certain communities to understand. So can you talk about why is it even important that that there are communities of child-free people? Why was it important for you to hear from women who were older and hadn't had kids? Like, what does that mean, for people who just don't get why it's something we even have to talk about?
Because it's so lonely. It is, I mean, and I really don't want this to, because I know I have a tendency because of my defensiveness in the past. Like it's easy for me sometimes to feel like there's a mothers versus child-free women dynamic in the world. And I mean, and conversations between people in each camp, I think, lend themselves to that sort of conflict. But I don't want that to be where we are. So I'm just saying that to say, like, I know people, women with kids who aren't able to socialize and spend time with their loved ones so that they would like they talk about being lonely. And I think people look at child-free people and think, oh, well, you have no responsibilities because, there's no grown-upness in this life. It's just frolicking all the time. And 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 you get to see anyone you want whenever you want, and you don't have any constraints on your schedule. But there's a loneliness in terms of being like just understood as a human, and my choices and my priorities and my values, because the default setting in our culture is we care, and similarly to, when you like, we care about the future because of what we want our children and our grandchildren and all of our progeny to experience. And so that in of itself just kind of nullifies like the existence of child-free people. Like, because we're not going to have kids on this planet in 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years, we don't like have a stake in what happens.
Mm.
And so I think just like really understanding that having children or raising children isn't what makes you a default contributor to the society.
Right.
And I think because that is so thoroughly messaged in so many parts of our life, it's very easy to internalize the fact that if you don't have kids, you're not pulling your weight, you don't have enough worth. And so I think knowing that there are other people who have made these choices and are happy with these choices and are at peace with them, it just really helps take away some of that sting of the judgment that's either societal or interpersonal that you can have making this choice.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I find so interesting because all of human and even some animal history like completely defies that idea that particularly women who don't have children don't contribute because men can have as many children as they want. Someone else is raising them. So
Yep.
so like if you look through all of history, it's women without children who are able to do a bulk of labor and a bulk of caregiving and a bulk of exploration and whatever else because they're not the ones who are at home raising children. And it seems to make so much sense that there should be both. I mean, look, I'm pro apocalypse, get the humans out of here, let nature take its course and be happy again. But if you want the human race to continue, then yeah, we totally need some women and preferably one day men will think they have responsibilities, but I'm not waiting for that day. I'm not holding my breath. But like that will, that there will be women who are taking care of the next generations in the future. But then that also there are groups of women who are doing all of the other types of things that need to be done. And there's also caregiving of seniors, right? And of so many and animals and so many things that women who are caring for children can't do. And so it seems like the balance, the equilibrium makes so much sense, and especially because it's about 80-20, right? It's like around 80-ish%, although that is swiftly changing. But
Yes.
around 80-ish% of women who have children, about 20 who don't. That seems like a natural balance. And it seems so obvious to me that feels right from nature. And yet it's so controversial.
It is. And I mean, when you started talking just now, I was thinking about what you said on the panel we were on and just how inspiring it was when you were talking about, the women throughout history who have been like the caretakers of humanity. And I really did appreciate that lens because of course you're right. And I don't know if you'll remember, but like I surprised myself by crying when I was reading my thing because like I did not know that. I mean, I like told my therapist, I was like, so, I wrote the thing and I practiced reading it and everything was fine. And then I started to cry. And I was crying because I was talking about the fact that when I left teaching, which I did for over 11 years, and I'm one of those people who like, if you knew me, you knew I was a teacher. Like it was my heart, and leaving was a very painful and hard thing to do. And when I left, I had to rework through some of the shame of not having kids because I had internalized the fact that, well, I'm child free, but I'm loving all these other people's children. And I am making a huge impact on like over 1,000 teenagers. And so, yeah, I completely agree with what you're saying, but also I'm just like, I'm sad that any of us are calculating our value by like what we're bringing to the planet, which is weird because I'm someone who really does believe in our obligation. Like one of my master's degrees is in like our ethics of responsibility to each other, right? Like we are obligated to one another and like should be in community with one another and collaborating and all those beautiful things. And I'm really working, maybe it's just for myself, on just trying to learn that we have value no matter what happens, like what we do and what we don't do. So anyway, I guess because I unexpectedly cried about not being a teacher and then therefore not having any value anymore because I don't have kids and I'm not teaching. So what am I doing on this planet? That's just something that I'm still playing with, I
Yeah.
think, like when I think
Yeah.
about being child free.
Well, and it's something that hits on both sides. And one of the things that I'm learning as I do interviews for this podcast and read and is I'm, Amy Deal and Leanne Zubinski wrote this great book, Glass Walls, and I have them on the podcast. But they talk about this maternal wall and that
Yes.
women hit it whether they have kids or not. And because we're all compared the same way. And when I think about this, and part of the reason why I think about like, mothers and non-mothers really have to come together is because it's not fair for moms to only be identified by the fact that they have children, right? Like you could have children and also do other things, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
have a job, read a book, or go to space or whatever. Like that's actually a thing that's possible. But even moms are really, you're either mommy or not, right? And like that is something that both sides are getting. Where I
Yeah.
think if there was less infighting and judgment, I mean, it's like most things. If people stopped fighting and judging each other, we'd realize, like, oh, actually, the enemy is the patriarchy, and we should all just come together and fight that.
Yes.
But the whole way that the patriarchy works is that they make us fight each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's so that actually then, because one of the things that I am really curious about is what has changed for you in the 5 years since you've written the article. What have you learned, or how have you adapted your thinking, or have you not? Are you still dealing with the same?
No, it has in fact changed. And so I appreciate that question. So two things I guess I'll say. One is the evolution of, like I said, in the beginning of with my child-free journey. I hate when people say anything journey because I just feel, but here I go, I'm doing it. My child-free coming to consciousness, I have become increasingly vocal about one, my own decision about not wanting to have kids, two, my refusal to justify that to
Mhm.
people, and three, which is much more recent, and obviously like I'm on this podcast in part because of this, because I'm more willing to showcase the child-free life as a completely legitimate and viable option. And because I have been thinking about the fact that, like I was saying earlier, there's so much messaging in media, in our politics, and even the toys we give kids to play with, like what the expectation is when you grow up. And I really want to be a proactive person who says, hey, this is a way you can live your life. This is
Mhm.
a choice you can make, and you will be like, yes, there's gonna be hard times with it because there's hard times with any choice you make, and it's really awesome. And if that's what you want to do, I hope it's what you do. So that's one way I've changed. And two, actually, as a result of that panel that we were both on, I've really been doing a lot of thinking, and I will soon be writing about the that point that, like, yes, mothers and non-mothers do need to come together in solidarity and partnership, because you're right, the patriarchy is the godforsaken problem, as always. And because I've been burned by mothers, like in my life, like people I know and people on the internet, but mostly people I know, it's hard to trust. It's hard, and I want to. I want to because I know, like I believe in the, like I just said, the coming together and the supporting and the working together. Like I believe in that. So I need to do my part to, like, whatever's happening in myself with like the whatever hurt I still carry, and know that like the common goal is the important thing, and to be able to work toward it. So like I guess it's a combination of letting myself get through whatever I have to get through emotionally, and forging those relationships
Mhm.
and making sure I'm a good ally for mothers and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny because we think about and talk about these issues and they're so sort of lofty and whatever, but most of the time I'm just a person living my life.
Hmm.
And there are times now, that I just am doing this podcast and having all these conversations, but then I'm just like a person making dinner, right? Like, or just like watching TV. I'm just like being a person, and I think like, is this what a conversation is about? I'm just
Right.
eating popcorn. Like it's so weird because there's all of the like governments are like freaking out about like us not having children. And I'm literally just watching our journey, right? Like it's like I'm just a person living my life and it's not something that and it just feels normal because it's just how I've always lived. And like I always have these moments of just realizing like we're having all these insane conversations about people however they're living their lives who are literally just like working, paying bills and watching TV. Like that's literally all
Yes.
we're doing. It's just some people also doing like diapers and homework, but like we're just people. And it's so funny thinking about how we've parsed and like judge this like totally normal thing of a woman just waking up, living her life and going to bed.
I know, because similarly, like how I don't want to have to explain myself for choosing not to have kids. I mean, and people don't. My experience is parents aren't asked why they want to, and
Yeah,
that
well,
whole
it's
thing,
like
which,
that great scene from House of Cards
oh, I
where
don't remember, but I did watch it, of course, because it was
I'm
2021.
so it's when I'm they had to replace what's his name with his wife because
Oh yeah,
he had to
Scandal.
cancel him, and she was being interviewed by a journalist, and the journalist asked her, "Did you ever regret not having children?" And she said, "Well, did you ever regret having them?"
Yes,
And
yes.
it's so great because it's like it just so pointed out the absurdity of the fact that yeah, you only get asked that question one way.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, similarly with if someone is unpartnered, it's like, okay, well, are you dating? Are you looking to get divorced? Or like, are you hoping to separate soon? Like
Exactly.
we don't flip these conversations back. And
Sometimes I do. Sometimes I'm like, you got to divorce this guy. What are you doing? Let's talk.
yeah, well, I don't know where I was going to go with that, but I do agree with you that it is when you really think about just like the general monotony of our lives
Right.
and how villainized they are when we're really just existing.
Yeah.
It is absurd. I
It's
agree.
it's so wild. So, all right, I you've been through this so publicly
Hmm.
that one of the things that I really want to do is give people, particularly women, because they face the brunt of it, some defensive strategies. So, what words of wisdom would you have for women who are being pressured or feeling shame or feeling attacked because they are choosing to not have children?
So I unfortunately am not one of those people who's like, I got some zingers for you. Like I don't know how to like so frequently in therapy, I'll be like, so hey, when this situation arises, like what should I say? And my therapist is like, that's not like I'm not gonna give you that answer. Like that's not how life works. But what I can do, because I am very good at being in my head and assessing my feelings, I can say to people who are feeling that pressure, and I know it can be the pressure can feel different depending on the source. Like there's like the societal pressure, but then that's like, is it your parents? Is it your partner? Like, is it your friends? Right. But like, God bless you, you were 7 and I was like 32. But like whenever we come to realize that we really don't think this is what we want to do. And like maybe there's like a part of us that absolutely knows it, but we can't admit it to ourselves. Wherever we are in that path, I think it is very important to like sit and remember this is your life. You are the one living with the outcomes of your decisions. And I think it can be very helpful. I've done this like in my head, but not on an actual list form. Why don't you want to? And again, this is not for other people to know because I am proud to not disclose my reasons because it's no one's business.
Yeah.
But like in my mind, and when I feel like talking about it, if it comes up, I will have a slew of reasons for why I don't want to. And they can seem quote unquote selfish or superficial, which they aren't, or they can be very profound, deep things like from childhood or like generational stuff, whatever, financial, all these things that are all valid. And if you have that list to yourself and just remind yourself, if I choose to have kids, like I'm not honoring that part of myself. Or if I choose to have kids, I'm not letting myself have the time and money and blah, blah, blah that I want to have. Like, I just really think centering yourself in the decision making because it is your choice. No matter how many things people try to tell you about it not being your choice, it is your choice.
Yeah.
And I think when you have that in your mind, it's even if the conversation is going to be clumsy and you might not defend yourself the way you want to, and you still might have the arguments. I just think it's important to be able to have that like inner knowledge that what you're doing is for you and you are the one who matters the most, the most, the most.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think that's so key. And really, whether you have children or not, being able to focus on yourself and your identity and crafting your own personhood is only going to make you better at being single or being a mom or whatever. And I think we forget that, either way. So I love that. So any big inspirations that help you through this journey, whether it's people, music, movies, books, like what are the things that sort of give you the strength to keep pushing?
Well, as you may recall, I love to read and write. So Sandra Cisneros is my favorite writer. And I actually met her the other day, and I've gotten really
Oh.
used to meeting authors and like don't do the fangirl thing, but this like I couldn't form sentences. It was embarrassing, but worth it. And she, she's known for House on Mango Street. This is the 40th anniversary of House on Mango Street.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, it's crazy. You're right, it's just younger than us. And she is child free, and she is a few weeks older than my mom. So she's gonna be 70 at the end of the year, Sandra is. And growing up as someone with like Mexican heritage, it was very, and especially at the time that she did, it was very expected that she would be a mother. And she didn't get married, she doesn't have kids, and she has been so consistently content with that decision. And that's so countercultural, like much more so than what I'm experiencing. And I just love how fierce she is about it. I love that, similar to the point you're making too, like she's had this like wild and wonderful existence, I'm sure in part because she hasn't had some of the responsibilities that people who raise kids have. And yeah, sometimes I just read her essays or her vignettes or her poems, because she writes everything because she's amazing. I just read her to remember that like it's okay. I'm okay with what I'm doing.
Yeah. That's amazing. I'm gonna now look a lot more uh English speak it.
It's so hard. It's
A lot
hard.
more about Sandra, because obviously, God, I don't even remember the last time I read House on Mango Street, but it was definitely too long ago. So that's going
Yeah.
on the list. But also, yeah, I didn't know that about her. That is awesome. Thank you, Kerry, for joining. I am very excited. It's great having, experts and a bunch of different people on who are all amazing, but I also really love just being able to talk to women about their personal experiences.
Oh my goodness, same. Yeah.
So, I feel like that's, when we're looking for inspiration, or, hopefully people are listening to this and feel. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and of course, leave a review. Until next week, here's hoping you find joy in your solo life.